We're going into now the second chapter of what I like to call the great unknowns of college football. And I asked y'all, what are the great unknowns in your mind when it comes to the college football season in 2023? And so without further ado, we're getting some of y'all's answers. Joe F. reached out and said his great unknown is USC's ability on defense to tackle. Joe, that's a very, very fair question. That's the $1 million unknown, if you will, because last year USC missed 156 tackles. It's good for 120th in the country. It's not good. That's not good. It's not going to be good enough to get to where you want to go, to get to where you expect to go in 2023 and make the college football playoff, compete for a national title. Like, we're going to talk about the Trojans here a little bit later in this live show, but they have everything offensively to expect the college football playoff. Goes back to the defensive side of things. So here's why I land on this. I think this falls on Alex Grinch. And I don't mean to just excuse the defensive personnel, but they've upgraded the defensive personnel since last season. Also, to be real, like, these are Division I athletes. These dudes are very much so capable of making the tackles that they're missing, quite frankly. So we look at what tackling requires. Tackling requires a couple of things. One is desire. Okay, you got to want to do it. You got to want to go take another grown man and put him on the ground. The other part of it is it requires a little bit of some comfortability. It requires reps. You got to be comfortable doing it. Got to be familiar doing it. If we're not tackling in practice, I mean, the COVID season's a great example. We saw teams not tackle during practice, saw a ton of missed tackles that season. You got to have some reps doing it. It doesn't have to be live to the ground, but look at a little bit of thud tempo. Wrap these cats up. Like, we need to be able to do that in practice consistently. Third thing, takes positioning. Got to have the right scheme in place. Got to be in the right position to make the tackle. I got to at least be in the right area to make the tackle. So the thing is, with desire, with reps, with scheme, positioning, like all of those things, the defensive coordinator controls or sets the tempo for. So I'm looking at Alex Grinch and I'm saying, okay, if tackling is the issue, that's on the DC. Yes, the players got to make the plays, but I need us to at least have the framework. I need to have the system and the process installed for this to be a priority for our football team. And it would be different if this was the first time we were talking about this with an Alex Grinch coach defense. But look at Oklahoma. This has been a thing that his defenses have been plagued by just a little bit. So there's a lot of pressure on him now with the personnel upgrading. And with Caleb Williams being there for one more year, like, the defense has got to make good on him being there. So we'll talk more about USC a little bit later in the live show. But USC's ability to tackle, absolutely a great unknown, and it's going to be very impactful when it comes to the landscape of the college football playoff. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you like the video. All we're going to ask. Thank you in advance for that. All right, moving right along here. Gabriel Rodriguez, the fourth, hit us up and said, how will A&M perform in 2023? He says, the floor is low and the ceiling is high. So here's the reason why the ceiling is so high at Texas A&M. Yeah, they missed a bowl game last year. Last year was last year. Not too worried about that right now as we go to next year. But you look at the roster and how they've recruited. I understand some cats have transferred out. The entire team hasn't transferred out, so this still holds, in my opinion. In 2019, number 4 ranked class. In 2020, 6th ranked class. In 2021, the 8th ranked class. And in 2022, they had the 1st ranked recruiting class. So I'm doing the math here, and even if you want to say some of those guys have transferred out, this is still going to be a football team that has a lot of talent and ability there. They've recruited well enough to compete with some of the big boys throughout the college football landscape. So the way I look at Texas A&M, we got a Ferrari of a roster. Are we able to put it in drive? Are we able to maximize the ability that we have on offense and on defense? And offense is really where you look at, quite frankly, because Bobby Petrino has come in now to be the OC. How much control does he have of that steering wheel? We're going to find out here, I think, pretty quickly. But the floor for Texas A&M, I think we already saw. I can't imagine a season too much worse than last year where you lose to App State. But the ceiling for Texas A&M, I think, is fascinating. And just throw wins and losses out of it for a second. Like, could Texas A&M be a 9-win football team? Sure. But look at who they play. Look at the ripple effect they could put on the rest of college football, man. They could put a dent in this college football playoff race. They play Bama in College Station. Remember, Texas A&M almost beat Bama at Bama last year. At Tennessee, who knows what they're going to be. They're a team that I think deserves some college football playoff attention. At LSU, they're thinking college football playoff. Like, if Texas A&M were to be on their game and to be a force, Let's just say they show up for one of those games. That changes the complexion of the entire college football playoff race. So the ceiling for Texas A&M, in my opinion, would be beating any one of those teams. That's what I'd be rooting for if I'm a Texas A&M fan, or one of the things I'll be watching closely for at least. Obviously, you're rooting for a lot more than that, but I think that needs to be taken into account because they're a high-impact team in my mind when it comes to what they have available at Texas A&M. Peter Marvin, his great unknown is, will Florida State's transfers perform or hold them back? And when he talks about performing versus holding them back, I'm not so worried about the performance side of things holding us back. My question with holding Florida State back with these transfers is, do they hold us back culturally? Because Florida State has the #1 returning production in all of college football. A lot of guys back. And that talent is important. But you look at what they did a season ago, I think that culture in place in Tallahassee is the most important thing you got to protect. A team that lost 3 games, bounced right back, finished the season strong. A team that had a lead against LSU in week 1, and they let them back in the game, and then they blocked the PAT to win it. Like, I know what this team is made of culture-wise, but you add 12 new transfers into that thing. That adds some other factors you got to deal with. That adds a little bit of extra, hey, everybody's got to be on the same page. Got to get everybody on board. Culture has to be protected. So I'm curious to see how those transfers are able to mesh with that culture. But from a performance standpoint, the question I'd be asking, the question I'm asking personally is, does the transfers perform enough to push them over the edge? I don't think they'll hold them back. I think they have a chance to push them over the edge and win an ACC title and compete for a college football playoff berth because they brought in some playmakers offensively. Keon Coleman, Jaheim Bell. Like, they brought in some guys that have a chance to add to that production. And they brought in some depth on the defensive line to ensure they don't run into some of those injury bugs they ran into last year. Because if they can score over 35 a game, if they can score over 40 a game, they were 35 a game last year, and they can hold it down on the defensive line and be consistent in that unit, they're going to have a chance. Florida State is going to have a chance. So I'm not so concerned about them holding them back. I'm concerned about how much they could propel them forward, in my humble opinion. Now, when we look at Oklahoma, that's another unknown we got to talk about here. Oklahoma obviously played Florida State close in the bowl game, and one of y'all hit us up, Sooner Born, said, will Oklahoma finally have a defense this year? Been waiting for that answer for a decade. Sooner Born, this is a great unknown, and I'm very glad you asked this question because this is a very, very high-impact unknown. If the defense at Oklahoma resembles more of a Brent Venables kind of defense, they could win the Big 12. Because I don't have as many reservations about the offense. I mean, they scored over 30 a game last year. Dylan Gabriel's back. Javonte Barnes is a dude. I think they'll have somebody step up on the outside and be explosive for him. Like, I think Oklahoma's offense is going to be good enough. But if the defense, with the personnel they've added, can just do a 180, they're going to have a chance. They're going to have a very legitimate chance. The personnel is where we got to really look because I don't think the scheme is the problem. I think the scheme and what you're asking your players to do is the big variable there. You added Desam McCullough. He's long. He's fast. He's going to be able to rush the pass. You're going to be able to cover. We've talked about this a few times. They've got some freshmen that I think contribute this year. Peyton Bowen, 5-star kid playing safety. Adepoju Adeboare. Some call him PJ. We'll probably call him PJ from here on out because that's just less of a tongue twister. But dude is an absolute dog. We better get used to saying his name a lot. Better figure out how to say his name clearly because he's going to be someone we talk about for years to come in Norman. Like, there's some pieces defensively. And if they're able to mesh from what they brought in from the portal and the players are able to be more comfortable in that scheme, they're going to be a force in the Big 12. You probably look across and see Texas, and that's the one school that you're really thinking has a chance to challenge as well. Obviously, anybody could challenge, but those are the schools that you're looking at from a roster and talent standpoint. Texas offensively could present some issues for you. They did last year. But if that defense, going back to this question, if that defense improves, Oklahoma is going to have a very legitimate chance to win the Big 12, and then we'll see what happens after that. But those are the great unknowns from y'all. We're going to keep doing this series, okay? So make sure you get at me on Twitter, at JD Piquel. Go find this tweet, and we'll retweet it for you, make sure it's out there. But I want to hear what you believe are the great unknowns in college football as we get closer and closer to the beautiful thing that is Week 0. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.